Hello, and welcome to another episode of Baja Tales and Travels. Real people, real stories, real Baja. I'm your host, Dee Marie, and today I have a guest, Bob Yourell, a local psychotherapist living right here in Rosarito, and we're going to be discussing thriving in an expat life from a mental health perspective. So, welcome, Bob. Thanks for
Thanks.
coming out today.
Good to be here.
Good. And can you tell us a little bit about your background, like where you're originally from and, what made you come to Rosarito?
Yeah, I grew up in LA. I'm an Angelino
Huh?
and
Me too? Woohoo.
had oh, all right, there we go. Well, I had a career going in mental health and I actually experienced a brain injury that just turned everything upside down. I mean,
Wow.
just destroyed absolutely. And my wife and I were like for a period of time pretty insecure as far as survival goes, and we
Yeah.
thought we like Mexico, we travel, we're learning Spanish. I mean, why not? We can regroup
Uh-huh.
and we stayed. We got connected. We were kind of joiners, we got
Yeah.
involved with like the Red Cross, Cruz Roja,
Uh-huh.
things like that. And since my brains weren't quite congealing yet, or whatever you want to call that recovery thing, I thought it occurred to me like, I don't know if I'm ever going to really get back on the pony or not, but I love music. I've always wished I could really be a real musician,
Uh-huh.
and get back into it. So I kind of devoted myself to that for a long time and kept up with continuing education and stuff to keep
Uh-huh.
keep aware of what's going on. And at one point, like a couple of years ago, my brain really switched back on. It was like
Wow.
one of those things that recovering from brain injury and recreating your neural network is a whole story in itself. I mean,
Mm.
how that works. Seems like everybody who gets a brain injury wants to write a book
Uh-huh.
about how I came back. But so then I reactivated my license and started seeing people, and I'm set up for telehealth or to go to people's homes and do house calls.
Oh, wow. So, what are the kind of issues that you've seen here with people with, expats trying to adjust to life here?
Yeah, that's it's I see what is a lot of literature and what they talk
Mm-hmm.
about, and also like corporate transplants.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole kind of science of when you move your executive to Mexico City or someplace and their spouse comes along, are they both flexible enough to do
Oh,
well
oh, wow.
in the environment? And so there's the corporate, and then there's just general research about who does well, and especially they want to emphasize the aging population because so many people move when they're retired to Mexico or wherever.
Right, because I think a lot of, especially from California, a lot of people are coming down here because of the
Yeah.
finances,
Yeah.
and they think, well, it's going to be an easy thing because it's like the suburb of San Diego,
A
it's not that
region,
far.
yeah.
Yeah. So, so the people have different kind of issues then.
Yeah, yeah, what they're finding is there's kind of two groups if you want to divide it up
Mm-hmm.
kind of cleanly. There are people who are fairly resourced, they're connected, they've got support things in place,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people who really don't for whatever reason. And so that can be a huge difference is those folks really need to maybe they need to develop their personality capacities. And that brings up a huge issue because people tend to think, well, your personality is just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this big shift happening where we're looking at in personality research at capacity instead of personality.
And what does that mean
And
exactly?
that means that you can really isolate some specific things that people can learn to do, like through education, through practice, groups, individually, or maybe even self help, depending on how flexible they are
So, are
with
you
that.
saying that people moving down here can basically sort of reinvent themselves if they find something that interests them?
Yeah, and in fact, if they're bumping up against issues like let's say they tend to be, for want of a better word, more rigid about how people are supposed to behave,
Mm-hmm.
and they're clashing with the culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a signal to them. Oh, one of the big success factors in transplanting yourself is cultural empathy. In other words, can you see this other culture with inquisitive, open-minded eyes?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of trying to control it or just reacting. I mean, you've had the experience, haven't you, where you go out and you have this really nice lunch, dinner, whatever, and maybe it was the atmosphere, maybe it was the food, the service, the friends, multiple things, and then one of your friends is going on about how horrible it was. You ever have that happen?
Well,
With
I think a lot of times people complain down here about the loudness of the music.
there's
And
that, yeah.
that's cultural, I believe. They just love to have loud music in restaurants,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know.
I have this event every month, and the gringos were complaining about the noise,
Hmm.
and a table full of Mexicans got wind that they were going to be turning it down. They're like, no, no.
Yeah.
So we had this controversy, and like the gringos, well, in the back it's quieter, and there's a patio, and
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe you want to move. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what other issues have come up with people that you've seen down here? I mean, is it different
Yeah.
than what people the same age would experience in the U.S.?
Well, what you have is if the person is having trouble with the change, it's often either anxiety or depression that gets
Mm-hmm.
kicked up.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, I mean, there are kind of different approaches to that, even outside of the psychotherapy, just in terms of lifestyle. Like depression responds when it comes to exercise, especially to resistance exercise like weights,
Uh-huh.
and also to mind body stuff like Tai Chi, yoga.
That helps depression? I mean, I was
Yeah,
surprised
I
by the
wouldn't say it's a
resistance.
cure, but yeah, I mean,
Ah,
I was surprised too, but
yeah.
that it trends in that direction, that's something
Hmm.
to look into. Of course, what really matters is what you're going to stick with and what grabs you, what gets you going. So it might be animal rescue, it might be
Right.
administering a charity, it might be teaching because a lot of teachers come down here because they got familiar with Mexico because they travel during the summer, right? So there's a high proportion.
So basically,
Yeah.
you're saying that getting involved in something, not just coming down here and just isolating yourself, that's what
Yeah,
helps.
isolation's a real killer
Yeah.
psychologically
Mm-hmm.
for whether it's anxiety, depression, anything like that. People need to get connected. And if they're super introverted, well, structural activities, stuff that's structured where you walk into it and you don't have to be a social butterfly or whatever,
Yeah.
because it's organized. I mean,
What?
I'm an introvert.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what about, there's challenges, I think, with some people. They come down here. Maybe they were a couple when they came down here and
Yeah,
either the other person passed away or they broke up or whatever. So
sure.
now they're a single person and it's a little scary, I would think, to go out on your own to say an event at a restaurant or a bar. So and to make friends. I mean, how do you walk people through that? Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's why I think it's important to get if you're in that kind of state, you're more shy or whatever,
mm-hmm.
or you're trying to break out of feeling low energy, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
against something that's actually kind of prepackaged for you.
Hmm.
Like charities, for example, if you get on the board or that you go to a class,
Right.
there's an interesting thing called Tranquilo that happens, and people can find it on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just a discussion of uplifting things that they do every month. This
Hmm.
this wonderful couple has this little house with a beautifully sculpted yard area with
Uh-huh.
various succulents and so forth, and they have this discussion and book signings and all sorts of other things that go on there.
Yeah, I
So
think we recently had one of the authors that had a book signing over there. So
yeah.
they're on my list for another episode. So
Oh
yeah,
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 they'd be great to talk
yeah,
to.
yeah. So what other suggestions do you have for people to adjust to life down here?
Yeah, well, if you like, we brought up the thing of the cultural empathy or
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, getting engaged,
Mm-hmm.
actually getting a little academic and learning about it, or getting onto Facebook and or some other forum or Reddit or whatever, and actually talking with people and seeing, or just lurking and seeing what are people saying
Mm-hmm.
about what do I really need to worry about? What are really the opportunities? Like people are so worried about violence, or at least people's relatives are.
Yeah.
Something happens 800 miles
Yeah.
away or a
Exactly.
thousand miles away, and they're telling me I really got to hunker down. Maybe I should leave. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, well, if something happened in Detroit, would you tell people to evacuate Los Angeles? I mean, it's that crazy.
Yeah. And people forget a lot of that
Yeah.
same stuff goes on, right in L.A.
Yeah,
and
if it's Mexican violence, that's scary. If it's American, it's our violence.
yeah.
Somehow it's
Yeah.
different. And of
Yeah.
course, the language gap can put people off too. It makes it scarier if you don't know if you're going to be able to communicate.
Well, I
with
remember when I
people.
was coming down here, I'm the kind of person I like to get prepared,
Mhm.
and I did a lot of research, but, and I did visit, but one of the biggest things I had was how am I going to deal with the currency? I don't know why. The
Oh,
peso and the US dollar currency was freaking me out for a while. And then after a while, it's like, especially when the currency was at a 20 exchange rate, that was easy, just to
that's
buy,
easy.
you
Yeah.
know. But it was just weird. It was like that was one of the things that was getting me a little anxious, and you know, the language I figured I could do with Google Translate if I had to,
Hmm.
you know, but a little Duolingo doesn't help either. I mean, doesn't
Hurt.
hurt
Yeah.
either, So, um, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but you talked about Facebook. Now, there's an interesting thing because one of the things I even did was I looked at there's a lot of
Mhm.
groups obviously related to living down here in Rosarito and Sonata, Tijuana, but people got to be careful because you have to be able to see what's really true and what's really going to help you and what's going to hurt you. And
Yeah. Yeah. If you read enough, you see trends.
yeah.
That I think that helps a lot. And fortunately, I mean, times have changed as far as like online forums go. That
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lot less trolling than there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit. It just depends where you are. Some admins, as they call them, the people in charge, are more tolerant than others.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think people have to be aware that, sort of, if it doesn't sound exactly right,
Yeah.
maybe that's not something you should be listening to as far as living down here.
Sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you can pick up on things over time. I mean, like the ATM fraud,
Oh,
where if someone tries to help you with your ATM, you got to immediately like just don't let them touch your card because they do magic with it and switch it out. These guys periodically reappear in town and do these things.
yeah, and the same thing I think is with the driving down the boulevard with the car trick, where one will stop in front of you and then they'll bump you and they'll rub chalk along your car or something, and want to shake you down for money. So there's a lot of those stories that have been.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think one thing that's really important is whether it's getting bugged by a troll or hearing one of these stories, is to put it in perspective as far as this is not the whole reality. This is something that you just want to be aware of so you're prepared just in case,
mhm.
you know.
Now, we talked about that. It seemed like there's a lot of retirees, obviously, that
Yeah.
come down here for a lot of good reasons. But I'm starting to notice younger people and families moving down here. Now, have you had any interactions with these people trying to adjust to life down here? Or
Yeah, there's a couple of things about that. One is bicultural couples.
oh,
Somebody gets deported, or they're
oh,
retiring, but they have a support system down here because the Mexican husband or wife has a whole family down
oh,
here,
so
which
there's
is
a whole new
nice.
dynamic
That's a
with that.
positive thing.
Yeah.
And of course, the gig economy, the online thing, a lot of young people are like, I can't afford to live in America. Forget it.
Yeah.
It's just too crazy, and they'll come down here, and they can run their YouTube channel or their corporate security
Mm-hmm.
work or whatever they're doing, telehealth wise, or video conferencing wise. I mean,
But do you find them having similar issues with adjusting to life here in Mexico or
well,
not?
it's interesting because I mean they're coming from whole different generations a lot of
Right.
times, right? And so they're dealing with earlier life issues with relationships and things like that. But I don't see as much difficulty with like cognition, like with thinking
Mm-hmm.
skills, but certainly you have the whole range of mental health issues
Hmm.
that can happen from trauma, depression, anxiety,
Hmm.
alcohol, drugs at
Oh,
times,
yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
addictions of other kinds. So,
Yeah.
sure.
So, any other type of issues that have come up with people that you've seen down here?
Well, just touching on the bicultural thing I
Okay.
brought up, it's interesting that sometimes the spouses actually haven't really fully bridged the cultural gaps, even though they got married.
Mm-hmm.
They got really excited and they got married, and now sometimes there's even a language barrier. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yeah.
I know enough Spanish that sometimes I actually have to help them communicate
Uh-huh.
around some they get stuck somewhere. So one of my friends has a Mexican wife, and he knew some Spanish, but she didn't know any English. And they got into some kind of little conflict. And he said, "Oh, you're stubborn." And the next day she said, "I looked that up. I know what stubborn means."
Wow, I can't imagine being married to somebody and not being able to understand the language barrier.
That was
That's
an
very
unusual, yeah.
wow, wow, yeah.
But it yet it happens. So
Huh. So, do you have actual office hours? You talked about telehealth and
yeah, I have hours that I'm available,
okay,
and I have, like, where you get on a platform and you have your calendar set up and that
okay,
sort of thing. But I'm pretty flexible,
okay,
and so it just depends
okay,
from week to week.
okay, okay. So, if somebody wanted to reach out to you,
Yeah,
what?
they can call, and I'm happy to just chat and
Mm-hmm,
help them get pointed in the right direction, and it might involve therapy or something
mm-hmm.
else.
Okay, so talk about the different kind of therapy that you do with people.
Yeah, I'm pretty generic because I have so many different kinds of
Uh-huh.
experience. I mean, doing employee assistance professional work is a real variety because people come in for free because it's an employee benefit,
Oh.
and you have to decide as quickly as possible, can I help them within their benefit of like 3, 4, 6, 12 sessions, whatever it
Mm.
is, or do I refer them out, or do they need a psychiatrist, or
Mm-hmm.
what? And so it really sharpens your evaluation skills, and you really hammer your short-term therapy skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of what my specialty is getting a direct route, or getting really clear on if this is a longer term thing, exactly why, what can you expect, that sort of thing.
So I know you're a psychotherapist, which is different than say a psychiatrist.
Yeah,
So
people get confused about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you can explain that a little bit. Yeah, I think that would be helpful if people know
Yeah,
the
a
difference.
psychiatrist is a medical doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and these days they especially tend to focus on medication,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, evaluation from a medical perspective. And then you have psychologists who are at a PhD
Mm-hmm.
level who may be more researchers, or they may be more clinical. And then you've got your master's degree level people like me, a marriage family therapist or whatever. And those, where I'm talking about stateside
Mm-hmm.
licenses. In Mexico, it's a little different, but there isn't really a license here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like, well, you get your work permit and you hang out your shingle, basically.
Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm getting at, psychiatrists, like you said, use
Yeah.
medication and stuff like that to treat people. What kind of therapy do you offer? I mean,
Yeah, the areas that I work in are everything from relationship issues,
mm-hmm.
marriage. I mean, that's especially what my license tends to
Mm-hmm.
be related to. But I have so much experience with trauma and anxiety, and also depression.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
this I have this one technique, and the things they're calling it are kind of changing over time as the science gets clearer.
Mm-hmm.
But desensitization is one term that gets used a lot, or EMDR, where if something triggers you, like authority figures, or trying to get into an elevator or on an airplane,
Mm-hmm.
or stuff from the past, rumination, you can't get somebody out of your head, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are techniques that really directly address that, that have just progressed incredibly, to the point where it's not just anxiety that they can work with, but they're moving into what they might call more somatic stuff, medically unexplained symptoms,
Mm.
like long haul sickness from COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about
It's
that?
like you can actually help. Somehow people, I should focus on this, somehow people get stuck where, like, chronic pain or depression or long haul COVID symptoms, sickness, whatever, doesn't switch off again. But the researchers are looking at this and going, it seems like in a lot of these cases, it's like the brain is prepared constantly for the fear connected with it on an unconscious level, and it
Hmm.
never switches off. So they're extending this EMDR and techniques like that, somatics, you'll hear it called a lot of times, into these areas, and they're actually getting results.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating to see the science coming along and explaining after the fact, oh, we think we know why, right? Like this circuit that seems to be switched on that just keeps the symptoms going.
So that's what they mean by long haul COVID is like the fear
Well, this
of
is a Johnny come lately theory. I mean,
okay.
originally, of course, it was just symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and they've got theories about the proteins and the different things going on with lungs and
Mm.
oxygen loss and so on and so forth. But as far as, like, when it seems like you would be cured and there's still this sick feeling inside you, they won't go away, and
Oh.
fatigue and brain fog, a lot of times, no promises, but a lot of times it turns out that doing one of these psychological interventions can basically make it fade out. And I should probably just, the mechanism is so basic and simple. I should just lay it out because
Yeah, I
it's
think
something
that'd be
people should
fascinating.
think about. If you activate a memory, and by a memory can mean a lot more than just I consciously remember something
Mm-hmm.
happening. I mean, it's embedded in you in some way,
Mm-hmm.
some connection, some issue, whatever, whether it's elevators or sickness or whatever. If you activate the awareness of that and then you associate it with a totally different state, you shift their state with relaxation, light hypnosis, eye movement patterns, back and forth, like with the MDR, that's kind of famous, uh, and really get that shift. Then, when the memory gets refiled just naturally, there's like this 6 hour window, but you're doing the work there. And then, as long as they don't get re traumatized, that memory gets refiled, but the anxiety or whatever has been cleaved off of it. So the memory goes back without the anxiety. And now they look at an elevator, say they had an elevator
Right,
phobia,
right.
and it's just an elevator. It's
Wow.
crazy. And a lot of times, unless it's a complicated situation, you get these miracle cures. And when this started happening, it started becoming popular like back in 1992.
Uh-huh.
There was such skepticism, but now it's increasingly being accepted. Now there's tons of research, and at one point it was really controversial because the research was so mixed. But just recently, there's been huge breakthroughs in realizing there was a piece of the protocol that was missing, and that explained every single time the research wouldn't replicate the good results. And so this is has huge implications for therapist training.
Mm. So that's like sort of symptomatic of people with PTSD?
PTSD is an excellent thing for this kind of technique.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Because I had a dear friend, and she told me she had PTSD, and I understood why. It was a very traumatic experience she'd been through. And then we were out one time, and I couldn't believe I saw her
Oof.
get triggered, and I don't even know
Yeah.
what it was that triggered her, but she just could not function at all. I mean,
Yeah. The panic and all that.
yeah, and just like
Yeah.
laying there and just shivering and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, PTSD is really something else. And the reason I brought that up is I'm thinking there's probably a lot of, vets that have moved here,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure if they're from the Vietnam era and things like that, they're dealing with a lot of PTSD. Do you
Yeah.
come across patients like that down here?
Absolutely. And the VA uses EMDR
Oh, they do.
and similar techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they have for many years now.
Hmm.
Yeah, but absolutely, you get people who have long-term trauma. That's more complicated. It might not be as simple as let's just go do this magic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like they might need a lot of stabilization. But fortunately, with light hypnotic techniques and things like that, you can get the exposure to the memory without it turning into a huge catharsis. They don't have to have
Mm-hmm.
an intense experience. It can actually be really mild.
Hmm.
That's a really important aspect.
Now, hypnosis. Do you deal with hypnosis or
Yeah, I have a lot of hypnotic training, and
really?
I use it in a very light kind of a way,
Okay.
but yeah, there's I mean here's where I should go. The thing about state change that I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
you bring up the memory and you get into a dramatically different state. Hypnosis can really help with that because it prevents them from spiking with the anxiety or whatever. And it can be mild. I mean, I'm not talking about people just, collapsing like stage hypnosis or something like
Well,
that,
see, that's what I always thought. In order to be hypnotized, that you have to be like super relaxed, and I would think personally myself, I'd be like all tensed up about it. I don't know if I could be hypnotized.
Sure,
Can anybody
sure.
be hypnotized?
People are actually on a spectrum. There are people that are very anti hypnosis. I don't mean attitude. I
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
their
They.
makeup.
Uh
Their
huh.
But people tend to go in and out of trances just over the course of the day,
Hmm.
driving, watching TV, whatever.
Ooh, scary if
They're-
you're driving.
well, it's like
You're zoning
their
out, kind of
their
thing.
body's awake, their reflexes are in place. If somebody pulls out in front of them, on go the brakes.
Okay.
But they can still be in kind of a trance of driving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, highway hypnosis, you've heard of that. Somebody's driving along and, 10 miles later, they're like, wasn't I supposed to stop at a gas station?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
that kind of,
Yeah. 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 Well, I know for me personally, my relaxation is just looking at the ocean. And I think that's
yeah.
one of the draws of living here in Rosarito.
Oh,
We're
boy.
so blessed to be right here along this coast, and you know, I know, myself when I've gotten bummed out or anxious or whatever, I'll just sit out there and I'll just watch, and hopefully a dolphin will go by or something,
Yeah.
or the pelicans. Just love the pelicans when they fly by. So in general, what would be your advice to people down here? Is it basically getting involved in stuff? I mean, what's the best way to live your expat life down here,
Yeah.
especially if you're the older person?
Yeah, I know we started off talking about kind of subgroups, but
Mm-hmm.
in general, yeah, the big mental health factors are involvement, exercise is huge,
Mm-hmm.
creative outlets, but especially when it's stimulating, just conversation is
Mm-hmm.
mentally stimulating. We don't want to, since we're talking about especially an aging population,
Mm-hmm.
your cognition can start to slide, your thinking can get
Mm-hmm.
muddy, can get forgetful. The antidote, or at least postponing of that, right, is creative stimulation, and conversation is a huge example. Getting involved in an art class,
Mm-hmm.
if there's something from your earlier life or something that you've always dreamed of doing, now's the time to do that, to bring that to life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that's part of it. When you think of when I think of like my parents when they were aging and stuff like that, if they weren't involved, I saw people around them that just weren't involved. When my mom ended up in a care facility, and she got involved with stuff, but other people didn't, and I could see the difference in the personality and just the way
Yeah.
they acted and stuff like that.
When
So.
I play old classic music
Mm-hmm.
in like an Alzheimer's care facility,
Uh-huh.
I people who are notorious for just sitting in the chair all the time have gotten up and started dancing salsa stuff that they knew back
Mm-hmm.
when they were from Cuba or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
or Sinaloa, and the staff are like, he never gets up, So
Mm-hmm.
it's like the environment is so important,
Mm-hmm.
and having music or art or some kind of stimulation, creating conversations in your environment, that's huge. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're a shy kind of a person, again, the structured activities is one way to get yourself mobilized, because so much of it's about mobilization. What's
Mm-hmm.
going to get you moving
Right.
and thinking?
Right, right. Well, this is a fascinating conversation. I hope our audience gets something out of this. Basically, from what I'm understanding, let people get out there, just go out, enjoy
Yeah.
where you are right now. It's a wonderful opportunity. I appreciate you coming out
Thanks so
here
much for
and
having me. Yeah.
sharing that. Again, this is Baja Tales and Travels. Real people, real stories, real Baja. And if you've got a story you'd like to share, we know everybody down here has a story. Um, Reach out to us. Just email us at studio212team@gmail.com and tell us what your story is, and maybe you can be on another episode. But until then, until our next episode, I want to thank you. And let's
Thanks.
bye, everybody.